Hello, welcome to the show. You know, I love an inspirational story, and Amy Haas delivers that today. I discovered her on Instagram. She is a runner who started running in a way to heal her life and have something for herself when facing her sister's addiction to heroin. She has since turned this little corner of the world into 135,000 followers on Instagram and a thriving business coaching, running, and mindset. All of this to help others while also helping herself and her family heal. We'll talk about that and more on today's show. Hi, Amy. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I discovered you in the world of Instagram and being there on myself now from a business point of view. I can see the hard work you put in and the ability you have to captivate us with your story and inspire us with all that you share. It's not an easy formula to create
No.
to create the content and, for lack of a better term, success you've created from something really difficult, which we'll get into that as well. So, again, welcome to the show, and I want to get started by talking about what led you to running and what was kind of the thing that you needed in your life to get through these really hard times that you've been facing with your sister. So, I saw one of your posts that said something like, "Oh, you run so much, isn't that great?" And you're like, "Yeah, well, I choose that over that's how I deal with the stress of what happened to my sister." So let's
Yeah,
let's talk.
yeah. I come from a family of addiction. Not just my sister, but my dad was addicted to alcohol. It runs in our family. Something I would later explore at like a rehab camp for families that we went to for my sister, where we actually traced back in our lineage how much addiction there was at each level with my mom, and like we put together this map and learned that our family is littered with addiction. So yeah, this
That's
all
a real thing.
yeah, it really was. It was actually that and mental illness kind of like they were both rampant in our family tree. So
So when you discovered this was this, and we'll back up a bit to your sister, but when discovering this, was this when you were younger, or was it at a time when you're like, "Whew, I've escaped this," or
no, it was actually at the very tail end of my sister's addiction when we went to a family retreat with her to kinda support her, and they were explaining to me specifically who was still blaming her for a lot of the pain that I had been through and a lot of the issues that we were going through and just everything. I was still in a mood of not forgiving her, and so we went through this exercise in order to pretty much show us, like, this wasn't her fault, like, this wasn't her choice, like, this is something that's been in the family for years and years and years and is unfortunately something all of it like, my entire family has to deal with, so, yeah.
now, when talking about, your sister, so let's back up a bit. Your sister was addicted to heroin for many, many years, so it wasn't just that she dabbled, which usually it isn't that people dabble in heroin, but, I mean, repeated rehabs, repeated near-death
Yeah.
consequences. Let's talk about that. So, what you she was younger than you, so you're watching it unfold. It wasn't as if you were young and didn't understand it. You're watching your baby sister go through this.
Yeah.
What age did she start using, and did it start with heroin, or did it start with alcohol first, or how did that addiction develop for her?
It definitely started with just her getting mixed up in a friend group that made questionable choices, and I definitely did not think it would ever turn into using heroin regularly, but one thing led to another. She met this person and then met that person and
And
got
how old was she?
how old was she? This was in high school. So it was like junior and senior year of high school. It was about when I was about to head off to college.
Okay. So she starts getting, really heavy into drugs,
Mhm.
and she's living at home. I mean, she's in school. She's younger than you, like we said. And was she able to hide it much, or was she I mean, were things a pretty big disaster? Were you guys clued into what she was doing and how bad it was getting?
Yeah, so at first, obviously, my mom tried to, put her foot down and really punish Kristen and be like, give her consequences, but it did eventually get past that where she just didn't care anymore if she was in trouble. She didn't care anymore if my mom was gonna call the cops. She just didn't care, and so she started just disappearing for extended periods of time, like weeks, months, just disappearing and not telling anybody. So it escalated fast, especially after she turned 18.
So she was in school, and I'm guessing probably missing some school, probably wasn't having success in school,
Yes,
and
actually,
yeah,
my mom ended up having to pretty much finish school for her online because she was not showing up.
wow. Okay. So then she goes through these times, and you talked about also you've shared that your sister was even pronounced dead at different times.
Yeah, that would be later on when I was in college and, like, after college, because it did that
On
was
for years.
yeah, it went on for years and years, and there were multiple occasions where she was pronounced dead and got revived or passed out at a wheel and somebody found her, so lots of scary encounters.
Yes. Okay, so then you have these experiences with your sister, and you're getting calls even at your work saying, your sister's been pronounced dead, and I mean, it's a lot to take in, and you yourself are not dealing with addiction other than the addiction of this your surroundings.
Mhm, yeah. But, yeah, at the time, that's kind of when I started to get into running really heavily because in a world that was very much chaos and out of my control in every possible way, it was killing me inside that I could not help her, that she did not want my help, that no matter what I said, I couldn't change what was happening. So I really started to cling to running as not only an outlet, but also just something in my life that I could control that, you know, you put in X, you get Y. It
Yeah.
makes sense. Like,
Yeah, exactly. So then when you started running, you said you've been on Instagram, you and I were talking off air for like 10 years. You have 135,000 followers. That's not easy to achieve. And you just are very forthcoming and honest in what you're sharing about your sister. I'm guessing she's okay that you're sharing. And we'll talk about her outcome here in just a moment. But with the running and how building it as something that's your own, let's take a break. And we come back. I also want to talk about how it's become part of your career. It's part of what you do for a living. It's part of how you impact your corner of the world. So let's take a break. We'll talk about your sister and her outcome, which is a good one, and then what you're doing now to help others. We'll be back in just a moment. Amy, we were talking about your sister and the multiple times she had to be really brought back to life, had coded, and her heart had stopped from using heroin. And she also went to rehab. Your family was part of that, trying to support her. Tell us what happened that finally was the end to her active addiction and how she showed up in the world, really, and was
yeah.
able to overcome.
Yeah, I feel like every time she went through a rehab, she took something away from it, right? I mean, there were less relapses, they were more spread apart, but ultimately, towards the end, she ended up getting pregnant. And at that point, our family was unsure what would happen with that, whether, we would end up having to help out, whether it would, where that would even go. But to our very happy and very grateful surprise, she turned it around 100% and is the best mom I have ever seen. So,
Well, so that was how long ago? How long?
Nora, my niece, is 6 now. So, it's about
She
7.
was addicted for she was using actively for, I think you said approximately 7 years,
Yep,
but
about
she's
7.
been she's been away from it almost as long as she was in it.
Exactly. Yep. We're almost, and we do celebrate it every year because it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So then your mom, and dad, I mean, you all made it through it. You said
Mhm.
that your dad struggled with alcoholism, so I'm sure he was empathetic toward her use of drugs, and the more you learn about the education of your family, like you said, your family history of addiction, when you decided to do the running part, so you're running, and that's good for you, and it's a release for you, and it's all the things that you described in the first segment. At what point does it become something that actually isn't just for you, but now you're deciding to share it with other people? And then even going to the 50 states, 50 state journey. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so that all came about very naturally. I started running, started racing. I didn't have my Instagram yet. I was just doing these races for fulfillment myself. But after I did my first one in Chicago, Illinois. Then I did my second one in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is where I'm from, where I was born. And then I did the third one in Columbus, Ohio, which is where I am now. And I realized, like, oh, I've done three in three different states. And my mom had been along on all three of them. It was something really positive that we could celebrate together in a very dark time. So it was something we bonded over. And at that point, she was like, "Well, why don't you just do Indiana and we'll knock out the whole Midwest?" And so we did. And then she was like, "Well, let's just do Pennsylvania." And literally one after another, we just decided to keep going until ultimately we were like, "Why don't we just keep doing this?" And so at that point, it was like during state 4 or 5 that I started the Instagram account and was like, "I want somewhere to keep all of these memories." It really wasn't to share with anybody else as much as it was for me to have a quick snippet of each place.
It's a great way to archive. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I started. But as I started posting, I realized how much I really liked it and I really enjoyed connecting with others and seeing their journeys and just building this space that had all of my running memories in it. And so I started to build and connect with more people and things kind of one thing just led to another with the whole process. It has been amazing.
Now explain to people who are watching what that from a business point of view, what that looks like for you. Because you do coaching and, a lot of people think I'm not a runner, I don't know how to run. Maybe people start, they overdo it, they get injured or it's just too, it's hard to start running if you haven't been a runner. And there's a method to getting from one point and your skill level to another and to build up your endurance and all those things. So at what point did it become a business?
So it definitely things changed a little bit as I started gaining momentum on there and I started connecting with more and more people who were asking me questions. Obviously, with doing the 50 states, I was very consistent. Like I was knocking out races very regularly. I was training year round, something I had not done. So I started making progress pretty quickly. And, like, with that, I also started noticing a lot of challenges really quickly, like, "Oh, you're not just gonna PR every single race," or, "Oh, you actually do have to, focus on what you eat beforehand or you will feel like crap." So,
Yeah.
there were these little things that I was learning with each race and with each state, and as I shared them, I got more and more questions from people, and it was at that point that I kinda decided, like, I love sharing my knowledge with people. I love that there are all these awesome questions and people are curious and people want more information about running and about making progress and even about, like, how expensive was that state to travel to or all these different things. But I realized I did not have the capacity to do it all myself or to answer all of the questions for all of the people all the time. So that's when I really started thinking like, I need to build a business around this and think about it more strategically. And that's when I created kind of the coaching program and all of that.
Yeah, and when PR is your personal record, right? So those things that I only knew that because I've read about, runners and things like I myself am not a runner, but I know people who are like yourself. And so having those goals to achieve and those milestones. So maybe everyone isn't going to run in races, let alone run in 50 states and all of that. But definitely having those mini goals. So you have
Mhm.
one-on-one coaching, and then you also have the other pieces of just kind of answering that's how this works in an authentic way, is you get asked kind of the same questions over and over, and then you're like, "Okay, well, I can create a digital product on that, and I can create a little mini course on that," and it's a way of duplicating yourself and your knowledge and being just a couple steps ahead. I mean, I'm sure you've been talking with people who've been running for a long time, but maybe hadn't quite figured out some of the things that you already knew. You only have to be a couple steps ahead of the person you're teaching.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, like you do start monetizing things because you get familiar with these questions that are being asked of you all the time, and your time is valuable. So, for me personally, it wasn't worth it at a certain point that I was getting so many questions, but I wasn't monetizing it in any way. It was just me spending hours doing this, and so it did become a situation where I feel like I had gained enough credibility, enough knowledge to be able to say, "My time is actually, like, worth a little bit more than this."
Yes. Well, and the other part of that is how some people, yours was such a, like you said, it happened in such an authentic way. A lot of times people are trying to build out, say, a digital product. When I say digital product, it could be a mini course, it could be something that people print out as a PDF, whatever that can be, whatever that looks like in terms of a product online, in a digital space. And they're polling their audience and they're putting out products that maybe flop, that don't work because they aren't sure what their audience needs, or maybe they're newer to that niche. And so they aren't even sure what's been most helpful to them. So your way of having those questions come to you and you monetizing those answers, that is what so many people in that space are trying to accomplish. And realizing it does take time. It does take
Mhm.
time to know what your audience needs and also what they want. And now I think it's genius because really all you have to do is take your phone with you for 30 seconds of your run each day. You could just that could be all you, but you're also realistic in what you post. So I want to talk about that in just a moment because there's all kinds of way to filter things, whether it's with words or, how you share yourself or literally with pictures to filter what Instagram looks like and what real life looks like. So let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about that because you're authentic in that way as well. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back, Amy. We're finishing up our conversation with you about how you came to running as a way to heal and just have something of your own when going through your sister's heroin addiction. We'll also say again that she's fully recovered since becoming a mom. So she's 6 years sober after her 7 year addiction. So she's been well almost as long as she was fighting that addiction. And your niece is happy and healthy, and your family
Mhm.
has survived it. So happy for you about that. We've been talking about how you've brought that to Instagram a decade ago, long before people were doing what they're doing now with Instagram, and growing this authentic audience based on the questions they had for you, other runners, people who wanted to become runners. And you coach that now. It's part of what you offer
Mhm.
to help people become runners, understand how to nutrition, how to nourish themselves before and after a run and prepare and all of those things. So one of the things that I really love about what you do is you post these contrasting pictures of what the reality of the picture is, which is often sometimes, your face looks funny because the picture's not perfect, meaning like your expression.
Mhm.
It's not, colored just right with all the filters. And then you post the one that's like people like to see with the,
Mhm.
I like to see both of them. And the side by side contrast is really, tell us why you decided to make sure that that part of your story is authentic too.
Yeah, I feel like there is a lot on Instagram, even when I'm scrolling through and I'm like, I wonder if that person is like, you just wonder, you make assumptions or you wonder, like, oh, that person must have a perfect life, or that person must just be gifted at that, or how lucky are they? But oftentimes you don't see the rest of their story. Actually, almost every time you see something, you don't see the rest of the story behind it. And so for me, that was, like, the clearest way for me to really share, like, the contrast between what everybody sees and what's actually happening, or what you don't see, or what happened moments before that, or moments after that, or what I was actually feeling at the time, because a lot of the things we see on Instagram or on social media in general, they might not show what somebody is actually feeling at a given time. They might just be smiling for the camera.
Yeah. And when you post those pictures of the run, it's actually, I love how you even showed the difference in your body. And,
Mhm.
you're turning a corner and your legs and body looks one way. And then you post this other more lofty picture. I mean, the filters, I've met people in person after seeing their Instagram and their face isn't even the same. And I'm not just talking about covering flaws and everything. I'm talking about some of them change the shape of your face and your body. And that's a dangerous thing, especially for someone like you who's trying to teach people about taking better care of themselves. We don't want to set an unrealistic expectation of what that even looks like in a camera, let alone in real life.
Exactly. I think that is the biggest thing for me is that I always wanna make sure that people know the reality of the situation, like, that it is not staged, that they are not getting this inauthentic version of me that isn't true, because my story is just as flawed and just as crazy and just, like, it's we all have things that we are
Mhm.
dealing that nobody sees, and I think it's just important to remind people of that, that we're all dealing with that at the same time.
We have just a couple minutes left. I want to ask you, for someone who's wanting to start running,
Mhm.
what is your advice about the first place to start? Like, what is the first thing, the question you get the most from people who are just starting out and your answer for it?
My advice, if you are thinking about signing up for something is one, just do it. Just pick a race and decide and share it with people so that you have some accountability because I think oftentimes we don't have that external accountability. And so we kind of just like let it go or we stop caring about it. But honestly, figure out why you want to start and then remember that every day that you are trying to do it. So for me personally, for a long time, it was hey, if my sister can get through that, I can surely get through 3 miles today. Or, you know, there's different reasons for everybody. So just cling to that why behind why you want to start.
I am big on the why. I
Mhm.
one of the things that I help people understand that is if you can really focus on the why, because motivation lags,
It'll come and go.
all of that comes and goes. But if your why is at the forefront of your reason for getting up and doing the thing, whatever the thing is, then when push comes to shove, that's what gives you the shove that you need.
Exactly.
And so as part of your coaching, we have 1 minute left. As part of your coaching, you also help instill the mindset and the process, not just the tactical,
Mhm.
strategical things about running, but that mindset to get that race done, to do that next thing.
Absolutely. Because it should be a part of your life. It shouldn't be this thing that just like lives in a bubble. It lives in your life that is very real and has very real challenges. So, yeah, I think it's important to also focus on that mental side.
Well, I appreciate your time here. Please give your sister Kristen my very best, and just happy for your family. It doesn't always turn out that way. And of course, you mentioned that pregnancy is what turned her around, and that doesn't always happen. So,
Mhm.
truly blessed your family, and really grateful to have your story to share here. So, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.